How's it going, everybody? Papa Wall Street here. And for this video today, what I'm going to do is go over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks of trade ideas that I've put out to the community, just as an overall review to show you that, although the market has been chopping sideways and big tech has been coming down, we've been able to capture some really nice swing trade ideas in that time frame. So I wanted to use this as a little bit of a review to look at some of these names. Obviously, it's difficult for me to give out updates every single day because there's a lot. There's probably about, I don't know, maybe about 30 or so names in this list that I'm going to breeze through. So I'll try and spend about, 30 seconds to a minute on each name just to give you an update on where we're at in the trade, where the entry was, and how the trade has really progressed. So let's take a look at our first one, Alcoa. And you could see here, trade entry was at 62.58, which was right here. Right? You can see once we broke out, we've had a nice move up. So the max on this trade was just at about, it's like about 45%. We hit this 3618 extension up here. That's a projection actually. And then we came back down to the 21. We failed at the 21. We actually gapped below it, came back up on Wednesday, retested it Thursday, broke back over it. And then Friday, testing the top of this channel you could see here. So this trade is still up about 30% from that initial entry. So not a bad trade considering the amount of time that we've been in it. Next up is ABBV. This has been one of the bigger trades so far this year. This was the second entry at 138, but the initial entry, I deleted the post here, but it was on the break of the cup and handle here. So from the break of the cup and handle till today, we're up about 30, looks like about 33%. And so you could see once we broke that cup, we came up to that 1272 extension. We came up to the 1618. We broke above that. We hit our next target, which was 138. And that's where that second entry came in. You could see we got resistance off of that level. It came back down to test that 1618, back test it, held it, came back up to 138, and I noticed all these failures. That's why the second entry came in here. And look at how it's riding that 21 EMA up. Now, the one thing I'll note on this trade so far is we are a little bit extended off of that 21 EMA. Anytime you get a little extended off of it, it usually snaps right back into it. So I would watch for potential consolidation, maybe some kind of flag in between 154 and 160. Watch for some consolidation, and then maybe we'll get a third entry off of 158 if we do fail there eventually. And then I would target 164 to the upside, and let me add the next level up there, which is our 4236. So then over 164, 170 would be our next target to the upside. Let's take a look at ADM. We had our initial entry here over 7805. Beautiful breakout, came right almost to our second target here. We blasted through the first target, and now we're back testing that first target here and starting to bounce. So let's see if we can retest 89 in the coming weeks. Next up is AMD. I talked about this on the week review. We still haven't triggered on this one. Just to note, the greens, those are the ones that are triggered and still green. The ones that are not green, they either haven't triggered or they triggered and failed. So AMD is still looking pretty good. I want to see this over 118.70. Next up is Antero Resources. So you can see first entry was over 2170. That was here. So I took that beautiful trade up. Now my second entry is going to be back over that 1618. So you can see we struggled here, right? Broke out last week or the week before last and struggled to hold it, came back down, and now we're coming back around. So watching for a new entry on AR over 2617. Next up is Arch. This is another nice winner. Beautiful cup and handle right here. Draw that out for you, right? Here's your cup. Here's your handle. Here's your measured move. We hit our measured move within about 2.5 weeks. It extended a little higher. Measured move is really, this is just a guide. I would never say it always hits perfectly, right? Sometimes it falls a little short. Sometimes it goes a little higher. But this is generally where I start scaling out of that position. And so you can see once we found some resistance up here, we pulled right back to that 21 EMA. This is our black line. And this is another way to kind of manage your trade. You can use the 21 EMA as a way to pull back and enter. You could also use it as a stop loss. I also, and I'll throw this on so everybody sees, I usually like using the ATR of 3.0. ATR is your average true range. This is an average true range trailing stop. So you can see from the entry, we don't get any daily closes under that ATR. So we should still be in this trade from 103.62 now up to 150. So this is about, just about a 50% trade. Right? So that's a 40% trade, a 30% trade, and a 50% trade. So these trades are out there, and it's my job to find them. And I'm trying to do as good of a job as possible to find these hidden names that not a lot of people are talking about. So far, so good. Right? Here's another one, CF. Took the entry at 74.77. And let's see, that was right back here. And we got that right back here, actually, and it chopped around for a little bit, right? But held that 21 EMA, and then it just accelerated, right? You had this TTM squeeze setting up right here. It fired. Once we fired, look at this massive move it made. And so now we're consolidating within a bull pennant. And so watch for a move back through, which we actually just had on Friday, back through 93.50. If we hold 93.50, my next target's going to be 100 and then 105.08 to the upside. Next up is Costco. Another one, been watching this one for a little while. Finally got our break over 550. And we got that on Thursday, Friday continuation, coming up to our first target at 571. Maybe we'll hit that this week. We had a 4-dot squeeze already fired. We're just coming up on RSI into overbought conditions, but looking pretty good. Here's another one, CrowdStrike, right? It gave us a false breakout back here, 310 pop on earnings. This was an earnings play. Let me throw on the earnings data here. So it did fail initially, and now it's coming back up. So when a trigger fails, right? Let's say you take a trigger and you're in, and then you put your stop loss after a couple of days back to break even, which I like to do, and it comes back and it stops you out, with basically net zero, on the trade, basically no loss or a slight loss, or even a small gain. If it comes back through that trigger, you should feel confident to take it again, especially if it happens pretty quickly within a few days. The triggers are always usually good. Sometimes you get those false breakouts. And so now we're back through that level. I would watch the 200 simple moving average. I think we have some room up to 224, possibly up to 230. And it says up to the 200 SMA at 241. At the time of the trade, that's where the 200 SMA was. But I think this is still a pretty actionable trade. Next up is Dollar Tree. So I'll try and scroll out a little bit on this. You could see I have this in a wave, or 5 impulse wave move up. So here's your wave 1, 2. Here's your wave 3. Here's your wave 4, and now we're in wave 5. So I think I pretty much nailed this in terms of the wave count. We took the entry over 144. We took the entry, got the back test, and we bounced right to our first target, the 1272 at 156. We're also through that on Friday. I think we can come up and see 164. I would start scaling out of the position here. That's potentially our wave 5 top between 164 and 174. Okay, moving right along, ENPH. We just reviewed this. It looks pretty good. We got our trigger on Friday, watching for these targets to hit in the coming weeks. Next up is EXPE. This initially triggered, right, I think at 2.8. We triggered here, right? Back test on earnings, came right back up, back test again, and then we failed. Big failure. So this one I would just say, I would not be in this trade anymore because it was a big fail, especially since you made such a quick move big move in a short period of time. But now we're back through that 188.15 trigger. And so I think this is still actionable as long as we hold 188. So you can see 3 days now we've held it. So any back test to 188 you can take, use a stop loss under that 21 moving average, and then we're going to be targeting 200 to 202, and then potentially upwards of 220 to the upside. Next up is FANG. This one did not trigger at all, But I would be watching this in the coming weeks to come back up to 139.51. It looks like it's trying. Just give it some time. It looks pretty good though still. Next one is FCX. This one's been a little bit of a wild ride. Let's see. We have that trigger over 46.10. This was, I think, the third trade in the last 12 months that I've taken on FCX. Came right to our first target, got rejected, came back, and failed right at our trigger. So now we're back through. It actually back tested that 50 simple moving average, and now we're back through the trigger. So this one was a tricky one. Again, you could have taken some profit here at 1272. You should have absolutely put your stop losses to break even once you made this move up to that first target. That's always something that I'll recommend. And yeah, you could have taken it back through the initial trigger, and then we would still be green here. But again, that's up to your determination, up to your risk management and how you like to trade. Okay, next up is FMC. This was a chemical crop play. You could see on 3-3, the trade idea went out. That was back here. We got that initial failure. We took the entry here, and we're coming up to our first target at 132.05. So this one is looking pretty good and is still active. HCA never triggered, so watch through. You can see how this is a great example of a stock that it triggered intraday, but it failed immediately. And so you don't want to be in this trade if you trigger and then fail. Look at the back test to the 21 EMA though, right? Nice back test on Friday. Let's see if we can come back through the trigger this coming week. 266.21 is the number. IRT, this one, again, trade alert on 3-3 through 26. Looks like it actually did trigger and then eventually failed. It actually failed pretty quickly. So we took the trigger here, hit that first target. So this is a common theme, right? You get the trigger and then you hit that first target, it gets rejected. This is why taking some profit at the first trigger or the first target, really important. And then once you start taking that profit, move your stops to break even. So right here, you're basically stopped out. So, it's a little trade, not that big of a deal, but it looks like we might have a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders forming here. So just watch again that trigger back through 26. We have still that move up to 27.27 and then 28.89 to the upside. Next up is Johnson & Johnson. This one triggered last week, struggled a little bit at 177.54. But we did back test and we held our trigger at 173. So as long as we hold over 173, still a good trade to be in. Kroger, another good one. This was a little tricky because it triggered right before earnings and then gapped up on earnings and then came up to our third target up here, our 200% extension. And now it's back testing that 1618 at 54.87. So if we hold this level, we should back test the 200% extension of 58.78, and then through 58.78, 65.11 would be my next target to the upside. Next up is LAC. This has not triggered yet, but looks really good. It's still consolidating within its wedge, consolidating within a wedge on RSI, and we have a TTM squeeze setting up. So watch for the trigger through 29.50. LPI was another one that didn't trigger, and we were just watching for a daily close over 85.79. You could see we tested it these 2 days and it failed, came back to the bottom of our wedge, and now it's starting to come back up. So just keep an eye on this in the next 2 weeks. Let's see if we retest 85.79. MEOH is another one. This one actually triggered on Friday. We did get a false trigger here, and then a breakdown, came right back to test that wedge, back through the 21 EMA, back through the trigger here. So watch for this 52.87 to hold. First target's 57, then 62.27 to the upside. Next one is NUE. This one triggered and back tested and bounced, right? So we got the trigger entry, hit our first target, reversed, failed initially at the target or the trigger, and then came right back up. Tested that first target again, back tested the 21. Now the 21 was right at our trigger, so now we bounced again, came back up to the 1272 extension, and failed again. And then we basically tested that on Friday. So this is looking pretty good. It's setting up in a nice bull pennant, And if we do get that breakout, then possible move to, let's get our 200% extension there, possible move up to 150 and then 165 to the upside. Next up is SCCO. This is Southern Copper Corporation. Nice golden cross, 65. We took our entry. I don't have the date on this, but I believe it was right here. And we failed at our first target here at the 50% retrace at 69. We came back, we back tested our trigger, held, back tested our trigger. It failed intraday, but came back up and held. And now we broke over and hit the next two targets. And then we failed at that 786, came right back down to that 50% retrace. And now we're moving way back up. So this one was a really choppy type of trade. But if you're nimble, would have been a trade that had paid. TRV, this is the Travelers Companies insurance play. And so you can see, look at all these resistance here at 174.08. Got that trigger last week, hit our first target at 200% extension. You could see we had 4 days where it failed. Watch for a move over 180.84 for our next target, which would be 190.76 to the upside. Next up is U.S. Steel. So this trade alert went out after the wedge breakout, but this was your optimal entry here. Your next good entry is over 30.52, prior high back here. You can see we did initially break out. We came up to the 1272 extension, our first target, got rejected, came back down, failed at our initial trigger. Recaptured it the next day, then moved back up, failed again at our 1272, came back tested our trigger again. And you see this play out over and over and over again. So this is why it's really important. Master Fibonacci, and you'll start to understand where these bounce levels are. False trigger through our first target, and then Friday we just closed right under. So this 1272 is giving us a little problem, this 33.92, but once we close over that, we should start to move up to 38.25. Next up is XEL. This one triggered and failed, I believe. So, yep, triggered right here, hit our first target, failed, and now we're starting to move down. So this one just doesn't look too strong, although it does look like it's flagging here, right? There's a little bit of a flag action right here. So should keep this one still on watch in the next 2 weeks. Next up is Zim. Shippers have been really, really strong. This was, I think, a second trade alert that I had put out on Zim in the last few months. I think the first one was over this trigger here. So second trigger here, and now you can see we blasted through our first entry or our first target at 82.26. Looks like we might back test that. Watch for that to hold. And then 94 and then 100 would be our next targets to the upside. And last but not least, this is a new trade alert, Zip, or a previous trade alert that just triggered on Friday, but this was from 311. You could see we came right through our first entry or our trigger entry, hit our first target, and now watch to see if we're coming up to 23.73. So I hope you enjoyed these trade review ideas. Again, these are all put out in the last 4 to 6 weeks. So there's definitely been some really, really good winners, and then there's been some names that have triggered and failed. This is why you have to apply good risk management. Make sure you're putting your stop losses. Once you're up about 5 to 7% on the trade, make sure you're bringing those stop losses up to break even. That'll prevent you from going green to red. That's one of the worst things for your trading psychology to let happen. And yeah, just keep in touch. If you're not a member, I'm going to post this to the socials. If you're not a member of my group, please consider subscribing. I'll drop a link in the comments below. And this is a little what you can expect. I do try and put out trade ideas every single day. Some days it's very few and far between, but some days I don't put any trade ideas out just because there's nothing optimal setting up. I don't just put out a trade idea just for the sake of putting out trade ideas. I want to see the ideal setups in terms of my style of trading, the way I look at swing trading. I really want to optimize the trade alerts and the entry triggers to the way I trade. And as you can see in reviewing these 30 some odd names, they do work. So appreciate you spending these 20 minutes with me to review these trade ideas, and I hope to see you in the room soon. Take care.